a decorated army colonel, the remains of a fallen soldier, and a flight he was refused. What happened next shook the entire nation. The airport was bustling, families tugging rolling suitcases, business travelers glued to their screens, kids darting ahead of weary parents. The usual chaos. Colonel David Carter stepped inside, the sharp click of his polished dress shoes echoing against the tile floor. He had done this countless times before, but today was different. The weight on his chest wasn't just from the medals and ribbons on his uniform, it was from the casket on the tarmac, draped in the American flag. Private First Class Jason Reynolds, 21 years old.
Gone too soon.
Colonel Carter adjusted his hat, inhaled deeply. He had a duty, one that surpassed rank, beyond recognition. This wasn't about him. It was about a promise, one made to every soldier who never made it back home. No one gets left behind. Approaching the airline counter, he set down his military orders and ID. The woman at the desk barely looked at him at first, typing into the computer, then pausing, just a second too long. Sir, can I see that again?" Her voice tightened. Carter handed over the documents once more, watching closely. The flicker of hesitation, the sideways glance to her coworker, the subtle shift in her stance like she had just stepped into something she wasn't ready for. She turned, whispered something to another agent. A glance was exchanged. A slight nod. When she returned, her smile was stiff, forced. "I'm sorry, sir, but there seems to be an issue with your ticket. We can't allow you to board at this time." Carter exhaled, slow and controlled. He had faced all kinds of situations, combat zones, foreign diplomacy, political red tape. But this was different. "I'm escorting the remains of a fallen soldier," he said evenly, tapping the paperwork. "Everything is in order." The agent avoided his gaze. "I understand, sir, but there's a security protocol in place and we can't override it." "Security protocol?" "Yes, sir," she continued, forcing another weak smile. "It's just policy." Carter didn't flinch, didn't move. "Policy? What policy?" Behind him, the line grew longer. People shifted, whispered. Their eyes were on him now. But instead of stepping aside, he squared his shoulders. He wasn't leaving without an answer. And the airline staff wasn't budging either. The air around the counter had changed. Conversations in the line had quieted. People were paying attention. A soldier in uniform being denied a flight wasn't something you saw every day. Colonel Carter remained calm, his voice steady. "Ma'am, I need to understand exactly what the issue is. This is a military assignment, not a personal trip. My documentation is valid." The agent hesitated again. Her eyes flickered to her colleagues huddled near the back, whispering. Then, finally, a supervisor stepped forward, mid-50s, tired expression, name tag slightly askew. He folded his arms, glanced at Carter. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience," he said, that polished, professional tone, the kind used when someone wanted you to stop asking questions. "But we have certain policies in place, and unfortunately, we can't override them at this time." That phrase. Again. Policies. Carter inhaled through his nose, slowly. He had seen this before, just in a different setting. "I've flown with military escorts before," he said, his frustration buried under years of discipline. "I know the procedure. And I know there is no policy stopping me from boarding. So, let's be honest. What's the real reason?" The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, cleared his throat. "It's just an extra security measure. Nothing personal, sir." "Nothing personal?" That was rich. Carter tightened his jaw, but kept his composure. He had been in too many rooms where vague explanations like this were used to hide something deeper. They were waiting for him to lose his temper, to give them a reason to call security. He wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Then, a voice cut through the tension. "Sir, do you have an issue with his military clearance?" Carter turned slightly. A man a few spots behind him in line had spoken up, mid-60s, weathered face. A USMC hat pulled low over his brow. A Marine. A veteran. The supervisor shifted. "No, sir, this isn't about clearance. We just have to follow standard protocol." The Marine let out a sharp breath. Yeah, I've been through security 1,000 times. And I've never seen's protocol stop a soldier from escorting one of our own home. He folded his arms. So what is it? More murmurs rippled through the line. People pulled out their phones. Recording. The shift in energy was undeniable. The agent behind the counter stole a glance at her supervisor. Now, even she looked unsure. The supervisor sighed, rubbing his temple. He looked at Carter again, the weight of the moment settling in. Let me check something, he muttered before walking off. Carter stood tall, unmoving. He wasn't going anywhere. And neither was the story. The whispers in the terminal weren't just background noise anymore. They were focused, charged. People weren't just waiting for their flights. They were watching, recording. And then from behind him, "Excuse me, sir?" Carter turned slightly. A young woman, mid-20s, phone in hand, her eyes uncertain but determined. I don't mean to intrude, but I just want to make sure I understand. They're not letting you board. Her voice wasn't loud, but the way she said it, careful, deliberate, made people lean in. Carter exhaled, glancing at the agent behind the counter. That's correct. The young woman blinked, as if she expected a different answer. She hesitated, then nodded, and turned her phone screen toward him. I'm live right now, she said. People need to see this. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Another man lifted his phone.
This is wrong, he said.
This man is literally escorting a fallen soldier. A woman further back raised her voice. Excuse me, can someone explain why he's being denied? The energy had shifted. What had started as quiet murmurs had grown into something bigger. Something the airline staff could no longer ignore. The agent behind the counter looked like she wanted to disappear. And then, somewhere in the crowd, it's already trending. Carter didn't move. Didn't have to. The world was watching now. And the consequences for the airline had only just begun.